Hello, you guys. Guess what day it is? Today is Friday, and I am currently recording my next YouTube video. And today's topic is going to be a little different than the previous topics and the previous videos that I have recorded. Quick little update. So I started school already, and this video today is based on one of the articles that we read for the California Freedom Summer Program, and we're going to be going over it together. So today's topic, it's becoming a leader in 2026. Okay, so I wanted to start off with a reflection question that kind of encompasses a lot of the article that we are going over today. So the reflection question for today is, what are the qualities you think a leader should have? Now you guys can pause it or take a little mental note or write it down. But what are some qualities you think a leader should have? The article we're going over today is Why Stories Matter by Marshall Gantz, 2009. So I took it as how your personal story is a story of leadership. All right, first we're going to start with who is this Marshall Gantz? So Marshall Gantz grew up in Bakersfield, California. He went to Harvard in 1960 and worked in the civil rights movement in Mississippi. He learned how to be an organizer and learned about movement building during his time during the Mississippi Freedom Summer. And some quick definitions. So the American Civil Rights Movement is a mass protest movement against racial segregation and discrimination in the southern U.S. states in the 1950s and the 1960s. And this Freedom Summer that happened in Mississippi, it's a 1964 voter registration drive aimed at increasing the number of registered Black voters in Mississippi. And we will talk about Freedom Summer in another video. But today we're going to focus on this article by Marshall Gantz. All right, so first thing he mentions in the article is by Walter Brueggemann from his book, The Prophetic Imagination. Okay, so he mentioned the two elements of prophetic vision. So there's two elements. First, criticality and hope. And this is a quote from the article. Young people come of age with a critical eye and a hopeful heart. And he mentions that because young people have both the criticality and both hope, a lot of young people end up working in a lot of social movements. And we can see this in the California Freedom Summer, where it was a lot of college students, a lot of young people. Okay, so what is an initial challenge an organizer faces? So according to Ganz, this is a challenge an organizer faces in the very beginning. How to break through the inertia of habit to get people to pay attention. He mentions that there are two ways that people can actually pay attention, and there can be a movement because of this attention. First would be the urgency of need, and number two, he mentioned it would be outrage. Sometimes it happens because of anger, and by anger, I don't mean rage, I mean outrage. It's the contradiction between the world as it is and the world as it ought to be. Our experience of that tension can break through the inertia and apathy of things as they always are. How do organizers master urgency to break through this inertia? So who is an organizer, or who becomes a leader in these situations where there is urgency and anxiety? If you let urgency and anxiety take over, this leads to despair and this leads to fear, which then leads to withdrawal and strikeout. So you don't want to do anything, right? There's somebody who is met with urgency or anxiety and they go straight to fear and despair. While on the other side, there's another person who is, instead of being scared or instead of feeling despair, they are hopeful. And what they do, instead of just withdrawing, like not paying attention and striking out, they ask questions and they learn what they need to learn. Hope is not only audacious, it is substantial. Hope is what allows us to deal with problems creatively. In order to deal with fear, we have to mobilize hope. Hope is one of the most precious gifts we can give each other and the people we work with to make change. And Stories are what enable us to communicate these values to one another. The way we talk about hope and about other values, we can't just talk about them in abstractions. We have to talk about them in language in a way that is concrete. All stories have three parts: a plot, a protagonist, and a moral. So a plot begins when the unknown intervenes. And the protagonist has to face a challenge. So they are presented with a challenge and they have to make a choice. And the outcome of this choice teaches them a moral. Story communicates fear, hope, and anxiety. And because we can feel it, we get the moral not just as a concept, but as a teaching of our hearts. That's the power of story. That's why most of our faith traditions interpret themselves as stories, because they are teaching our hearts how to live as choiceful human beings, capable of embracing hope over fear, self-worth and self-love over self-doubt, and love over isolation and alienation. Okay, so this next part of the article mentions how do we recapture the power of public narrative and learn the art of leadership storytelling. We start with the story of self, followed by the story of us, and then the story of now. And we'll be going over the definitions right now. So the story of self is your calling or your reason for doing what you are doing. According to Ganz, you don't have any choice if you want to be a leader. You have to claim authorship of your story and learn to tell it to others so they can understand the values that move you to act, because it might move them to act as well. The story of us: what experiences and values do we share as a community that call us to what we are called to? So now it's not just one person, but it is a group of people. It is us. It's putting what we share into words. We've all been in places where people have worked together for years, but there's no us there because they don't share their stories. Faith traditions are grand stories of us. They teach how to be an us. And then what is the story of now? So the story of now is after you're sharing your values and your aspirations in the story of us with other people, we realize that the world is not what it should be, but instead it is what it is, the reality. And we need to appreciate the challenge and the conflict between the values by which we wish the world lived and the values by which it actually does. The difference between those two creates tension. It forces upon us consideration of a choice. What do we do about that? We're called to answer that question in a spirit of hope. Our goal is to meet this challenge, to seize this hope and turn it into concrete action. After developing our stories of self, then we work on building relationships, which forms the story of us. From there, we turn to strategizing and action, working together to achieve a common purpose, learning to experience hope. That's the story of now. And here we have some photos from the Mississippi Freedom Summer as well as the Montgomery bus boycott. All the inequalities between blacks and whites were driven by a deeper inequality, the inequality of power. Organizing is to make arrangements for something to happen, while mobilizing is to organize or prepare something, such as a group of people for a purpose and they move to do something, right? It's like mobilizing, moving. You're actually doing something. While organizing is more of the thinking process, like the brainstorming, the getting the people together, making the arrangements. Mobilizing is when it's being done, what was prepared. The Montgomery bus boycott shows how individuals come together to create a collective power. So each person decided not to pay the bus fare and not ride the buses. Instead, they would help each other, right? And the collective power is in between the whole community. That's what made the really big difference. So this is what defines leadership. According to Ganz, leadership happens when facing uncertainty, and even though there is uncertainty, you are still enabling others or still helping others to achieve a purpose, to achieve a goal together. So that is what defines leadership. And he mentions, for example, when there is certainty, right? When you already know what's going on, when there is no uncertainty, when there's no problems, you already know what to do, right? Nothing has changed. So you don't need leadership. However, it is when you have uncertainty or things that have not happened are now happening, or when things are scary, when you don't know what to do, that is when creativity and art, this is what he mentions in the article, that through creativity and through art, through creative means, through artistic means, you need leadership. So you need leadership when there's uncertainty and people do not know what to do. One way to look at leadership is reaching down to mobilize the resources of a constituency and turning them into goals consistent with that constituency's values. So this is a body of citizens entitled to elect a representative. So pretty much just a group of people that have chosen a specific person to represent them, right? So that's what leadership should be. Using the resources for the people according to what the people want. Okay, so I showed some examples of ways that people have been organized, or that there have been these leaders, these stories in the past. But now I want to mention some things that have happened recently. So remember, what is the initial challenge of an organizer? There's only two ways to break through that inertia: the urgency of need or an outrage. And these are some examples recently that have happened. That is the ICE, which stands for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So people have come together after the unaliving of Renee Goodman, who was fatally shot in Minnesota by one of these ICE agents. And then recently, ICE used a 5-year-old boy as bait to arrest his father and then took both of them. Examples of how leaders have stepped up recently: this church organized a food delivery for scared community members in Minnesota. And then people have been making red pamphlets of the Know Your Rights and whistle kits to give out to their community, which I will show a video of right now. And also a community member has provided free prints for the community. And a lot of people have come together, and I'll just show you guys a little bit of the videos. Let me see.
That somebody tells you, and remember kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
And then
I'm Art Price, and I am putting free prints on the shirts and other fabric that anyone brings us to print on. I decided to start doing this because I have this cooperative screen printing studio space that I run, and I didn't have a lot of shirts, but I had a lot of equipment and ink, and I was very, very angry. The response from the community has been absolutely incredible.
And then here are just some of my citations I just wanted to give a little summary or a little reflection or conclusion of what I thought of the article. Why stories matter: because your story can potentially move another person, also make a movement. So I just wanted to recap of self. So your own story, what you have experienced, what you have gone through, your own lived experience. Then the story of us is when you talk to other people who have similar values and share the same things as you do, and you guys move together as a collective. And the story of now. These leadership stories are what moves people. That's what continues to motivate people to see the hope that there still is, even though there is uncertainty present. But yeah, I really liked this reading for my class. I'm looking forward to the readings for next week, and I'm going to be sharing one of those stories or articles and go over it together with you guys again. So yeah, until next time, bye bye.